Welcome back to another episode of restoring this 1930 Ford Model A four-door. Today, I'm going to be putting the clutch assembly onto the rear of the engine, and let's see how that turns out. Stay tuned. Alignment of this flywheel and the pressure plate and the clutch and the whole system and the housing is extremely important from everything I'm reading. If you don't have it lined up properly, you're going to get vibration throughout the car when you're driving down the road. So this is like a super critical part of this. And in the How to Restore Model A, this is volume 4. On page 10 through 15 is an absolutely awesome article about how to align it, the problems associated with misalignment, and one diagram showing all the parts in the transmission and clutch assembly, how it's properly aligned versus how it's not. So this is what I'm going by in terms of putting this on. So this is my these are my instructions here, and that's what we're going to follow. So the first thing they're talking about is putting on the gasket and sticking it up there. The other thing is these bolts right here go through to the block or to the inside the engine. So they're saying put a little bit of ATV onto the bolts, and that will seal up any oil potentially coming out of there into the bell housing or the clutch housing, whatever you want to call it. So that's the first thing we're going to do. And then we're going to put on the flywheel housing and get it all lined up here. So that's our first step. Okay, so I've put the bolts in. I put a little bit of Loctite on there, the sealant type Loctite, to seal it up. It says torque them down to 55 pounds, but don't put the safety wire that goes through the bolt heads on yet, because the shims have got to go in the back here once we decide how much has got to go in here. So that's what I'm going to do, is torque them down. Okay, next up is the aligning of the housing, and this tool right here is shown in the book, and so evidently somebody made these and they're selling them at all the parts houses. So I've got one, and we're gonna see if we can't make this thing work. It says to put this flat against the crank, which I have. It's tight. And it says to take this carriage bolt and adjust it in or out until there's 37 or 30 thousandths of an inch here gap in between here using feeler gauges. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Okay, now it's calling for this shim, which is 15 thousandths, although the book says 10 thousandths. I've got a 15 thousandths shim. It's the only one I could get. And it says that this is very flexible when you pull it back, even though the bolts on here are tightened down to 55 pounds. And sure enough, I can see a gap between the block and the ears of the flywheel housing. So the book is kind of explaining it exactly. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to stick one shim on each side. We are at 30 thousandths right here, just like right here. And I tested it, it's 30 thousandths all the way around. And the question is it going to stay that way once I tighten down these bolts, these at the top here. And of course, I forgot the the throttle linkage. So I'll pull these back out and stick them back in. Hopefully our shims will stay in place. Well, I think this is okay. Shims are in. They said for sure you got to put them in there because of the amount of pressure on the top of this to keep it this way. And sure enough, and it's 30 thousandths all the way around. So backyard mechanic once again coming through. Only time will tell when the rest of it's put together and it's running and driving down the road. So let's take this off. I'm going to wire up the bolts, and then we'll move to putting the flywheel on and making sure that gets aligned okay as well. So far, so good. Okay, the safety wire's on. Now it's time for the flywheel. All right, so now we have our newly balanced and resurfaced flywheel. We've got a new ring gear on here. It looks really, really good. It looks like Antique Engine Rebuilding did a great job. In reading the book, it's calling for the exhaust manifold studs to be used to help you get this in place on the posts that are here. There's 2 posts on the back of the crank, but these studs are temporary. They're only going to the crank so that you can slide it on here because this thing weighs 60 pounds. It's heavy. However, the studs that were in here, I've been working on it for the last 10 minutes. I can't even break them loose. They are rusted solid. So that's not going to work, and we're just going to have to manhandle this thing to get it onto the crank and then be able to stick a couple of nuts on here or bolts on here just to hold it in place until I can get everything else done. So this is going to be a challenge. I hope I can do it by myself. If not, I'm going to have to get a neighbor or a wife or the dog maybe. I don't know, but let's give it a shot and see what happens here. It says torque them to 50 pounds and then put on the safety wire, and making sure that the safety wire is not sticking out here so it doesn't interfere with the clutch disc. So that's what's up next. Okay, flywheel is on, bolts are in place, safety wire is on. Now it's calling for adjusting or making sure that everything is aligned. So let's do that next. Well, I put this tool on, went all the way around using 30 thousandths on the feeler gauge again. And boy, it's gapped, I think, pretty well. I don't know how far off. I'm sure if there were the modern tools to measure alignment, I'm sure it would show that things are off. But according to the instructions, according to this tool, it looks not too bad. So only time will tell when we get it running. But let's put on the pressure plate and the disc, and I think that we'll call it a day. So we have our V8 pressure plate disc that we're going to put on next. This looks really nice, very smooth and machined well. So it should be a good combination and work well for us. And I have an alignment tool. This is kind of cool. That basically represents or replaces the shaft coming out of the transmission for purposes of aligning the pressure plate into the pilot bearing. That's how it's going to sit in where when I put it together. And then you just take this thing out and you should be all aligned. So let's get that on next. This is going to go against there just like that. And this is going to go on, and it's going to be kind of a challenge to do both at once. So let's get one of these maybe started up here first to help with holding it in place. I think so. And you can see the difference here. This part sticks out a little bit further than this part. This part goes towards the back of the motor or back of the car. This goes towards the front. So we'll put that in there like that and put our alignment tool in and find the pilot hole. Which is right there. So this is aligned, and now we can put the washers and the bolts onto the flywheel. Well, that concludes putting on the flywheel housing and aligning it. The flywheel, the clutch disc, the clutch, and it's all done. That's what it looks like inside there. Once I pull this thing out, there you go. That's what it looks like. And these three pins, these black pins right here, that's what the throwout bearing presses against when you push on the clutch pedal. And not too bad. This is now ready to be installed. Still got a ways to go before I do that. But at least now the engine is ready to go back in. Finally. I still got my fingers crossed on it starting and not vibrating going down the street with this whole thing. But I think I got it, and only time will tell. So thank you very much for watching this episode. Subscribe, of course, to the channel if you want to see me progress with this thing over the next year. I don't know, the way it's going, it may be another 2 years before it gets completed, but that's the way it goes. And of course, check out modelatshirts.com. That's where I got all this stuff. And that's kind of cool stuff to have when you're a Model A enthusiast. Thanks for watching.